Have you ever noticed the moment you stop chasing, stop explaining, stop caring, they suddenly notice your absence? Today we solve a simple but deadly problem: how to reclaim power from those who take your attention for granted and turn their calm into panic without lifting a finger. In the courts of kings and the streets of commoners, one law is eternal: he who needs less rules more. This is not kindness. This is not mercy. This is power. Today, I will show you why the moment you stop caring, they start panicking. There is a moment in every imbalance where the scales threaten to tip, not because someone pushed harder, but because the weight was quietly removed. This is the nature of indifference. It is not loud. It is not a storm. It is the absence of wind that leaves the ship stranded. In the courts of the powerful and in the private kingdoms of relationships, the one who appears to care the least often holds the most influence. Not because they have more resources, not because they have more charm, but because they are not enslaved by the need for approval. Imagine the daily theater in which you have been the most eager actor. You anticipate their needs before they are spoken. You reach out when the silence stretches too long. You bend your time and your will to ensure they remain pleased, engaged, or reassured. Each gesture seems noble, but here is the cruel truth: the more predictable your loyalty, the more it is taken for granted. Your value is no longer measured by the worth of your presence, but by the ease of your availability. And so, like water running downhill, their attention begins to flow elsewhere, seeking the challenge that you no longer provide. But then something changes. You do not announce it. You do not argue. You simply stop moving toward them with the same urgency. You answer a day later instead of within the hour. You stop rearranging your plans to accommodate theirs. You allow the silence to breathe, to grow, to make its presence felt. At first, they do not notice. They assume it is a passing mood. But when the pattern continues, the air shifts. That is the moment, the turning of the tide, not when you confront them, but when you withdraw the constant reassurance that your care was theirs for the taking. Indifference in this sense is not cruelty. It is not neglect. It is the disciplined choice to stop feeding a fire that has been used for warmth without gratitude. You pull back not to punish, but to restore balance. You have recognized that in the economy of human connection, scarcity creates demand. When you are always there, always ready, your presence becomes a background hum, pleasant but ignorable. When you step back, the hum disappears and they are left with the sudden quiet. That quiet forces them to look for what has gone missing. And here is where the psychology turns in your favor. Humans are wired to notice loss more acutely than gain. When you withdraw even slightly, the absence feels sharper than the countless moments of generosity they once overlooked. The mind begins to question. Why aren't they responding? Why aren't they reaching out? Has something changed? Have I done something? You have shifted from being the one who seeks to the one who is sought. And in that shift, the power moves without a fight. The art of indifference is not a permanent state. It is a strategic posture. You remain watchful, measuring the responses, noting the adjustments. The more they lean in, the more you see the hunger for your attention return. It is in this space that you can decide, will you grant it freely once again? Or will you maintain the tension until respect is restored? Machiavelli would tell you that people are most careful with what they fear to lose. By stepping back, you transform your presence into something they can no longer assume is guaranteed. This is why kings would occasionally close their gates, why generals would refuse certain meetings, why lovers would become suddenly elusive. It creates an atmosphere of unpredictability. It reminds others that your attention is a privilege, not a right. And privileges, when withdrawn, are pursued with far more effort than they were maintained. You become less like an open market and more like a guarded treasury. But it is important to understand the shift must come from conviction, not pretense. If you pretend indifference while still craving their approval, the mask will slip and your strategy will fail. True indifference begins with a change in the mind, the realization that your worth is not dependent on their recognition, that your life is full with or without their constant presence. Only then does your withdrawal carry the weight of authenticity, and authenticity is what others feel most deeply. In the courts of Florence, Machiavelli watched this dynamic unfold countless times. The courtiers who hovered too close to the duke were dismissed as sycophants. The ones who kept their distance, who offered counsel only when asked, were regarded as wise and indispensable. This was not coincidence. It was the natural result of human desire gravitating toward what it cannot easily obtain. The moment you embrace this truth, your behavior changes naturally. You stop rushing to fill the gaps. You let others sit with the discomfort of wondering where you stand. You replace the compulsion to explain yourself with the discipline to remain silent. And slowly they begin to circle back, drawn not by your efforts to please them, but by their own fear of losing what they now realize they need from you. Absence is not simply the lack of presence. It is a force, a pressure, a mirror in which people suddenly see the outline of what they have lost. It is the shadow that lingers in a brightly lit room, the echo that reminds you there was once a voice. And in the realm of influence, absence is often more persuasive than constant presence. When you are always there, always available, your image becomes a fixture in their world, like the old portrait that hangs in the hallway, familiar, comforting, but rarely noticed. People stop turning their heads to look at it because they know it will be there tomorrow. But when the portrait is taken down overnight, when the wall stands empty, the absence becomes impossible to ignore. This is the psychological weight of removal. The human mind has an ancient bias. It reacts more intensely to loss than to gain. A small loss will sting more than a small gain will satisfy. This is why gamblers chase their losses with desperation, why a missed opportunity haunts longer than a victory comforts. When you remove yourself from someone's daily rhythm, you awaken that instinctive fear. I had something, and now it's slipping away. That fear is not gentle. It intrudes, it gnaws, it shapes their thoughts even when they wish to ignore. In relationships, whether political, social, or personal, this effect can be more potent than any speech or display of emotion. Words can be argued with, emotions can be dismissed, but silence cannot be debated. It leaves space for the other person's mind to work against itself. They begin to supply their own reasons for your withdrawal, and those imagined reasons often cut deeper than anything you could have said aloud. The absence becomes a blank canvas, and they paint it with their own insecurities. Machiavelli understood that absence used wisely is a weapon that needs no announcement. In the courts of power, a sudden disappearance from the duke's gatherings was rarely accidental. It was calculated. The noble who removed himself without explanation forced others to wonder, is he falling out of favor? Is he in secret counsel elsewhere? Does he hold information we do not? Curiosity and suspicion are powerful motivators. People will chase answers far more aggressively than they will chase affirmations. This is why absence should not be confused with neglect. Neglect is careless. Absence is deliberate. Neglect signals you have forgotten. Absence signals you have chosen not to be there. That distinction is everything. One can be forgiven, the other demands explanation. The more intentional the absence, the sharper its edge. The reaction it provokes is rarely uniform. Some will attempt to pull you back with invitations, with apologies, with displays of warmth they once withheld. Others will mask their unease with hostility, pretending they are glad of your silence, though their eyes betray the opposite. The most dangerous reaction, and often the most satisfying to witness, is the quiet panic. This is when they do not speak of your absence, yet their behavior shifts in small but telling ways. They glance toward the door more often. They speak your name with feigned disinterest. They send messages disguised as casual check-ins. And here lies the heart of the strategy. You are not chasing them. They are chasing the space you once filled. They are negotiating with a void, and you control the void. You can choose when it remains empty and when it is filled again. This choice is what gives you the upper hand. In more personal arenas, absence reshapes the emotional dynamic. The person who once assumed your attention was endless now feels the cold edge of uncertainty. They replay past conversations, searching for the moment things began to shift. They recall your past gestures of care and measure them against the silence now surrounding them. And often in that reflection, they realize the depth of what they took for granted. Absence also creates mystery, and mystery breeds desire. When someone cannot predict your next move, you become a puzzle worth solving. They begin to imagine your days without them, your conversations with others, your laughter in rooms where they are not invited. It is not jealousy alone that drives them. It is the human compulsion to resolve the unknown. We are drawn toward closed doors, toward locked boxes, toward what is kept just out of reach. But absence cannot be used carelessly. If you vanish without having established your value first, your disappearance will go go unnoticed. The ground must be laid before the curtain is drawn. So, your presence must be memorable before your absence can be felt. This is why the most effective withdrawals occur after a period of generosity, connection, and reliability. Only then does the absence feel like a theft rather than a coincidence. In the dance of influence, absence is the pause that makes the next movement more powerful. It is the space in music that makes the note resonate. By stepping back, you allow the other person to step forward, not towards someone else, but toward you. And when they do, they come with greater urgency, greater appreciation, and a sharper awareness of the role you play in their world. Panic is rarely loud at first. It begins as a whisper, a subtle unease that coils in the stomach. It's the sudden awareness that something once certain has shifted, that the ground beneath your feet might not be as solid as it seemed. And when you stop caring, when you step away without warning, that whisper becomes a voice they cannot silence. This is the panic effect. The moment you withdraw your energy, attention, and interest, you disrupt an unspoken agreement that you will always be there. Even if they never voiced it, they counted on your presence, your messages, your reassurance, your effort. You were part of the architecture of their comfort, and your absence is not simply a missing brick. It is the removal of a supporting pillar. And when a pillar disappears, the structure begins to tremble. At first, they might try to convince themselves nothing is wrong. They tell themselves you're busy, distracted, preoccupied. They reach for rational explanations to avoid confronting the possibility that they have lost a piece of control over you. But the human mind, when deprived of certainty, begins to dig. It replays conversations. It examines past interactions for signs that were missed. What was once casual becomes a subject of analysis. The panic takes root in this overthinking. Panic in this sense is not about fear of you directly. It is fear of what your absence says about them. It is the gnawing question. Why am I no longer enough to hold their attention? Humans hate not knowing. The brain is designed to fill in gaps, and when no clear reason is given for your withdrawal, it invents one. Sometimes that invented reason is worse than anything you could have told them outright. They begin to believe they have lost status, favor, influence, and that belief drives them into action. Machiavelli observed this in the politics of Florence. When a favored advisor suddenly stopped attending the Duke's councils, whispers would spread. Not because the advisor made accusations or waged war, but because his absence implied something dangerous. Perhaps the Duke no longer valued him, or worse, perhaps the advisor was now in secret alliance with someone else. This uncertainty would unsettle not only the Duke, but the entire court. Everyone would watch the missing man more closely than if he had been there in plain sight. Panic is amplified by unpredictability. If they could anticipate your next move, they could prepare for it. But when you stop caring, you stop broadcasting your thoughts and intentions. You no longer respond on cue. You no longer give away your feelings and expressions or words. You move at your own pace, unhurried by their urgency. And to someone who once relied on your predictability, this is deeply unsettling. Predictability gave them a sense of control. Unpredictability leaves them stranded. The beauty of the panic effect is that it forces the other person to work harder. They reach out more often. They speak in ways designed to provoke a reaction. They try to draw you into the same patterns that once guaranteed their comfort. They may even overcompensate, offering you attention, kindness, or concessions they previously withheld. Their goal is simple: to restore the old balance where your care was abundant and their position secure. But that old balance no longer exists. Not because you destroyed it, but because you removed the one thing holding it together: your unquestioned investment. This reaction is not always immediate. In fact, the delayed panic is often the most effective. When your withdrawal is gradual, it gives them time to believe they are still in control. They do not realize they are drifting into uncertainty until it surrounds them. And then one day, they wake up and feel it. Your absence like a cold space in the bed, your silence like a locked door in their own house. That realization is sharper than any direct confrontation could ever be. Panic also thrives in comparison. When they see you engaging with others, friends, allies, strangers, while maintaining distance from them, it deepens the sense of being singled out. They begin to wonder if someone else has taken their place in your regard. Even if you are not replacing them, the image alone can drive them to desperation. In the human mind, losing a valued position to another is one of the most potent triggers for action. But the most telling sign of panic is not in their words, it's in their behavior. Watch for the way they suddenly seek your approval in small ways. Notice how they check your reactions more carefully, how they soften their tone, how they hesitate before speaking. These are the tells of someone who fears they are slipping from your favor, And while they are adjusting themselves to please you, you remain steady, composed, and unmoved. The panic effect is not about cruelty. It is about restoring balance. It is about breaking the illusion that your care was infinite, unearned, and permanent. By withdrawing it, you allow them to feel the weight of its absence, and once they feel it, they cannot ignore it. The panic drives them toward you, not because you demand it, but because their own mind demands relief from the uncertainty you have created. Indifference is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is the deliberate choice to stand unmoved while others scramble to win back what they once took for granted. When you stop caring in the obvious ways they've grown used to, you strip away their ability to predict you, to provoke you, to manipulate you. And in that space, you reclaim the most precious currency in any power dynamic: in control. The first shift happens internally. When you no longer feel compelled to react to every slight, every shift in mood, every attempt to draw you into unnecessary drama, you begin to operate from a place of steadiness. They can raise their voice, but you remain calm. They can withdraw their affection, but you remain unshaken. This does not mean you feel nothing. It means you no longer let those feelings dictate your moves. You have stepped into the role of observer rather than participant, and from that vantage point, you see the game more clearly. Indifference is misunderstood because most people confuse it with apathy. Apathy is the absence of interest altogether. Indifference is the choice to not display interest where doing so would give away your leverage. Apathy makes you disengaged from the outcome. Indifference makes you disengaged from their control. You still care about your own position, your own dignity, your own peace, but you no longer allow those things to hinge on their approval or attention. This change is disorienting for anyone accustomed to your constant investment. They have learned the patterns. A certain tone in their voice would make you explain yourself. A certain withdrawal of affection would pull you closer. A certain criticism would push you to prove them wrong. Those reflexes kept them in control. But when those reflexes are gone, when their provocations are met with composure instead of reaction, they are left without a script. And when they have no script, they begin to make mistakes. Machiavelli would say that indifference is the armor of a ruler who wishes to remain untouchable. In the court, where emotions could be weaponized and alliances shifted overnight, showing too much care toward any one player was a liability. The wise ruler cared deeply in private about the stability of their reign, but in public, they displayed an air of calm detachment. This gave the impression that no single individual could sway their judgment or disturb their peace. It made those seeking favor work harder, offer more, and fight amongst themselves for attention. The key to reclaiming power through indifference lies in where you direct your focus. Instead of pouring energy into proving your worth to them, you invested in strengthening your own position. Socially, financially, emotionally, you become less dependent on their validation because you are building validation from within. And as your self-sufficiency grows, so does their awareness that they are no longer the center of your world. Indifference is most effective when paired with subtle presence. You are not vanishing completely, which might allow them to write you off entirely. Instead, you remain visible enough for them to notice that you are living well, advancing, thriving without their influence. This contrast between their expectation of your dependence and the reality of your independence creates a quiet, relentless pressure. They begin to measure the difference between how you once acted around them and how you now carry yourself without them. When someone realizes that their power over you has diminished, their behavior often changes in one of two ways. They either try to regain that power through charm, generosity, and renewed effort, or they attempt to provoke you back into old patterns through criticism or neglect. The brilliance of indifference is that both tactics fail if you remain steadfast. Charm no longer sweeps you into compliance. Criticism no longer unsettles you. Every failed attempt reinforces the truth. They no longer hold the same place in your mind. Indifference also creates time for clarity. When you are no longer consumed by the task of managing their emotions or protecting their ego, you can see the situation for what it truly is. You can evaluate whether their presence in your life serves your goals or hinders them. And because you are no longer desperate to hold on to them, you can make decisions from a position of choice rather than fear. This is the essence of true power, not just having the ability to act, but having the freedom to decide whether you even want to. The most telling effect of indifference is the shift in who is chasing whom. At first, they may have been the center of gravity, drawing you toward them. But once you stop caring in ways that cost you your peace, the gravity changes. They feel the pull now. They seek the reassurance you once provided. They measure their own worth against your reactions, and when those reactions are absent, they feel the absence like a void. That void becomes their problem to solve, not yours. This is not a performance to be turned on and off for manipulation's sake. It is a discipline. The discipline to hold your own ground, to resist the impulse to over-explain, to endure the discomfort of silence, and to let them sit with the consequences of your withdrawal. Over time, they will either adapt to this new balance of power or fade out entirely, and either outcome leaves you in a stronger position than where you began.